So to kick us off for today, for our webinar, brief introductions. You'll see my mugshot at the bottom there. So my name's Scott Green. I'm one of the account managers here at Prosperon Networks. And you'll see Mark Roberts there. Hello, Mark.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining.
So Mark's our technical director. So many of you will probably be familiar with his name and his face, perhaps from working directly with him on some of your installations, perhaps from these webinars, maybe even perhaps from Thwack as well. So just at the top of this screen, there are a few links I'd like to make you aware of. Like today's webinar, we actually post these on our YouTube channel. That's for those of you that want to catch us there as well if you can't view all of this. And if you want to check us on our socials as well, you can see us on LinkedIn and Twitter. We've got a good following there, and also our blog as well, which is hosted on our website. So that's just a short introduction for all of you. The agenda for today. So today is on full stack application monitoring with SolarWinds. So today we're going to try and illustrate what can be achieved with different SolarWinds modules, but relating to application monitoring over a complex application structure. Now, of course, Mark's going to talk you through this more, but I'm sure for many of you watching this, you'll know that people on my side of the fence, the non-technical side of the fence, the interface between the chair and the keyboard, we're probably the first to complain when there is application performance issues, things running slowly, and the challenge is then, of course, how do you find out what's causing that? So that's what today we're going to try and look at. Of course, as per normal, we'll take you through a quick introduction of Prosperon, who we are, what we do, how we help our customers on their SolarWinds journey, and I'll try not to take up too much of your time with that. And then we'll take you through some of the common challenges and also then a live demonstration illustrating how you can use a number of different modules to get those results. Now, as per normal, bit of housekeeping here, you can ask questions throughout the course of the webinar. Please do so. We try to keep these as interactive as possible. If we can't answer them as we go through the webinar, we will try to come back to those at the end and have a question and answer session at the end. We also, to keep that interactivity, have a few polls, so I would really encourage you to take part in those polls as well. Right, so a little bit of an overview about who we are. Some of you may be new to us, some of you may be familiar with us already. So we're a leading UK authority on deploying, tuning, and training users of SolarWinds products. So you'll see on the screen there's some things that we're really, really proud of. We've been a partner for 15 years with SolarWinds, and obviously other vendors as well, but SolarWinds is one of our real focus areas. We provide nationally and internationally over 700 days, 800 days, sorry, of professional services now.
Keep going up. Yeah, it gets bigger and bigger every year, my friend.
That's it. So so that's something we're really proud of in terms of being able to help you guys out with your platforms. But of course, it's not just professional services that we're focused on. Many of you that are already familiar with us will know our support desk as well. Some of you will have spoken to our support engineers in terms of getting issues resolved. And a lot of the times, you may or may not be aware that we're doing that without the assistance of the vendor, which for us is, again, we're really proud of, but mainly because that highlights our expertise in dealing with these challenges. Now, our team, our engineers, we're of course accredited by SolarWinds. Some of our engineers are security cleared, so we're able to work on some of even the most sensitive platforms. And over the years, we've received all different types of awards, and for some of our deployments, we've been lucky enough to. Some of those awards are technical excellence awards for some of the deployments we've taken part in, and of course, a couple of our engineers are MVPs for the Thwack community. So I'd assume many of you are familiar with the Thwack community, but for those of you who aren't, Thwack is the community of SolarWinds users that is hosted on the SolarWinds website. So it's really a good collaborative place. A lot of people contribute ideas, share experience, share knowledge amongst users. So finally, in terms of our presence at SolarWinds, obviously we've worked with them for 15 years. That's a core focus area, but we also work with other vendors such as NetBrain. So some of you may have seen a session we did some time ago, a webinar on NetBrain. I believe there's one that's coming up shortly as well. So NetBrain, for those of you who aren't aware, is all about automation, documenting and visualizing the network, giving you that ability to really easily solve problems. So you also have the ability to bring data from SolarWinds into the platform and share between the two. So as I said, there's a session that you can view on our YouTube channel, but I believe there's also another one that's going to be coming up soon if you're interested to take a look at that. So very quickly, our next slide around the professional services that we offer and the range of those professional services. We pride ourselves on being able to provide services for whatever part of the SolarWinds journey you're on. So maybe you're just embarking on an implementation for the very first time, and at that stage, we get involved with deployments from all different types, all different scales, right from getting the basics done right up to full production implementations, all singing, all dancing around platform, where we work really closely with you. And often we try to include knowledge transfer with that delivery as well. So we empower users to pick up and run with it once that's complete. On the consultancy side, of course, there are many of our customers that have had SolarWinds for a significant amount of time. And at that part of the journey, we often help where maybe there's been restrictions such as resource, time, or knowledge, whatever it is, that's perhaps meant that things like alerting, some of the SolarWinds versioning maybe have gone stale over time. Perhaps it's helped taking advantage of new features as they're released. Perhaps working on maps, reporting, dashboards, all really common things that just help that performance within the platform. The other part is around system integration. So we're asked more and more to bring other solutions to talk with SolarWinds. So really commonly, that might be things like service desk integrations. I talked very briefly earlier around that knowledge transfer and how we try to empower our customers' users to take that platform, customize it to their own needs and run with it. So training is something that we do, and we do a range of different courses, ranging from the administrator course, giving users all the training they need to get from where they are now up to the accredited professional status. But others may have users of the Orion platform, such as NOC users, people who may not need to know how to navigate through the solutions in detail, but need to know how to view the things that they need to view. So they could be things like management roles, people that need to know specific things as well. And it's something we've seen down the years and introduced different training courses. We've got admin courses, user level courses, bespoke courses, master. There's a lot of them that we can offer for the various different needs of your users. Another thing that's not actually mentioned on here is our managed service offerings as well, where we act as an extension of your team to effectively manage your Orion platform as well. So you've also got on this slide support and health checks as well. So support, I mentioned in my last slide, I believe we're servicing around 800 tickets per year at the moment. So that's something we're really proud of. And obviously the health check there, that's something that we offer both to our customers that have maintenance with us as a free service, but also a little bit more in depth as a paid health check to get a bit more detail on how the system could be improved, any particular areas that could be, as I mentioned, going stale and could either cause performance issues in future or just improve performance for users. So I think the next slide is focusing on the...
Sorry, my spacebar decided to double tap.
That's all right. So here we've got a product overview of the SolarWinds product portfolio. So there's a lot of things going on this slide. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one going on to every single module, but I'll just break it down quickly. So as you'll see down the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see that all these different modules represented by these colored rectangles are grouped into 5 different focus areas. So you've got your application monitoring stack, your network management, systems, database management, IT security, and help desk. And of course, as I'm sure you're very much aware, the aim here of this product stack is so that whatever it is you're monitoring, you're able to see all that data in a single pane of glass dashboard, and by adding additional modules, enrich that data. So the focus of today's webinar, as I mentioned, is to leverage some of these applications that are focused on the application side and show you how they can be used against some common use cases that we see. And the ones we're going to focus on here are those that are focused, outlined in the green sort of rectangles. So I believe we've got our first poll coming up, and then after that I'll hand you over to Mark, who can take you through some of the challenges that we commonly see. So we've got our poll here.
Bit of interactivity to go in before we move on. Certainly these polls are good for us to understand why you're joining these webinars. Helps us shape future webinars, so the kind of participation will be really appreciated here. So that will all help, and certainly with regards leading into these questions, we definitely want to receive questions from you today. This is a webinar and series of webinars which we're commonly doing to kind of provide information to be able to demonstrate what the capabilities of the platforms are, the licenses you've got, maybe have not got. And so from this, it's going to help us really tune what we do in terms of our content. So I was just looking here, we've got database and storage, interestingly, leading the way.
Yeah, we've had a couple of different ones taking the lead at different points as we're starting to get more coming through.
Yeah.
See a few for server and application as well.
Yeah, that's now jumped into the lead, isn't it? There, look.
Yeah, interestingly, no one with no gaps at all.
No, well, there's always going to be a common question that we have when we're doing these engagements is, I don't want to overload us with information, and it's not.
Yeah, of course.
That's a difficult one to deal with, because there are times where you need that information. That one piece of data that may be hidden away on a page will save you 3 days of analysis. So it's very much an art form to capture the right amount of data, and the most important thing there is controlling that presentation of that data. Make sure you get
how it's presented to the user.
Yeah, and then the alerting, obviously, what is actually genuinely alertable.
Because those alerts need to be actionable, of course, you know.
Yeah. So can we then publish the results of that? There we go. So everyone can see that the server and application layer of the tiering is very much the one, but also quite strong up there is storage and database. Certainly the application side of things was one we thought was going to be the case. It's one we are well aware of in terms of what our customers have in terms of that visibility issue.
I think I must have tempted fate with the no gaps at all there. I think those answers came in after I said that.
Yeah, well, good to see. Good to see, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, so what I'm just going to start off in here, I'm going to move on very quickly because I want to show the application interfaces, what we do and how we do it. But just kind of setting the scene, we are seeing ourselves with our engagements with customers, and clearly from an industry point of view, application architectures are getting more and more complex. There's a number of reasons behind this, whether it's the fact that you're moving to SaaS and you're moving to cloud and you're moving to or changing to hybrid models, microservices, DevOps, lots and lots of reasons why applications are not these kind of single monolithic platforms anymore. And that adds a whole layer of complexity. And what I've got here on the slide is just an example of a kind of application tier. What this doesn't show is the infrastructure that sits underneath it, and that is often even more complex. So where you have Docker and then overlaying Kubernetes, and that web application has, as you can see, a number of technologies within it. You've got caching layers and Java middleware layers, and then that's going through to virtualization or cloud servers and a storage layer. Say that the 50% of people putting in their storage as an issue. How this architecture and this tiering capability to provide that application to your front end users, because your front end users are literally just consuming that top tier, that web application tier. They're using their browser, they're using their application, their mobile phone to go and consume what the back end is then providing. So we can be talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of individual metrics, status objects that are all part of the application stack. So this inherently is complex. So when we come to the challenges around that, clearly there are significant elements here. It's, are you collecting all of the data that you need? if you're not monitoring the storage layer or you're not monitoring the database layer correctly and fully, when there is a performance or an outage or a configuration change that takes place on that layer, that as part of that stack then causes the web application to slow down. So if it's a public facing website, then maybe the page load time has doubled or trebled. Well, now you're going to be risking the fact that users are going to go off to competitor sites. If it's an internal application and your users are consuming it, if they're having to wait 10 seconds every time they click on a link to go to the next page or submit a form, this is going to multiply in terms of efficiency. So one of the big things, and if any customers that have worked with us, a bit of the main conversations we have during that engagement is what measurements do we need to capture? What is your application? How does it work? What infrastructure and services all contribute to it? And we'll work to kind of pick that apart, get that topology understood, so we can then say, okay, so you are running Kubernetes and it's sitting on top of a Docker. And we want to therefore identify how many containers are running, when they scale, what compute resource they're consuming, load balancers. Are load balancers balancing the load correctly? Yeah, just you've got something in place doesn't necessarily mean it's working correctly. Then we have information presentation. So I've indicated there in terms of those multiple teams. We've got multiple people responsible. Again, we have customers where there is a team of 3 people that look after everything. Yep. So it's networking, it's storage, it's virtualization, cloud, all of that is under their remit. But clearly, the larger the organization, the more likely there will be separation into specialisms. So the DBA, they need specific tools for database monitoring. But that's not to say that the infrastructure and sysadmins don't need to see that as well, because if they have a ticket come across their lap, and they trace it to the fact that it's database, they can work through that much more efficiently to then bring Steve or Mary or Joe or whoever is the important person that's going to come along and help resolve that. And that's that big aspect there, that time to resolution. That mean time to identification of the issue. Well, that's what your monitoring solution is there for. We want to reduce that window because we've got the data, we've got the trigger points, and then we've got the ability to then do the analysis, identify where and why and how. We've got our issues, so then that can be focused and targeted on that application. So this complexity is very much about identification of what you have, what you need to capture in terms of monitoring, how you present that data, the different roles and team members, how you alert on it, to then give you the greatest capability of resolving things in a timely fashion. So before I go on and do the live demo, just a quick second poll here. So this one is identifying the kind of challenges that you encounter on a daily basis, or indeed as part of project delivery. Some customer engagements that I've got running at the moment, the conversations are actually not so much about the technology, but actually about the architecture and the different people involved, because one in particular, they're talking to multiple vendors and suppliers. And so that adds a particular challenge and complexity to that process.
While we're waiting for these to come in, Mark, where do you? This might not just seem, it may be a silly question, but where do you rank this as the importance of this layer of monitoring? You know, when our customers and if they're not our customers, SolarWinds users are looking at monitoring, looking at network monitoring, all the different sort of product stacks we looked at earlier.
Yeah.
Where in that ranking do you rank this as important?
It is critical. I mean, the fundamental principle here is the more information and knowledge you have at your fingertips, the quicker you are able to respond in whatever is the appropriate manner. This may be that firefighting. Yep, something's broken. It's a reactive response. Your monitoring solution has picked out whether it's the network, the storage, the cloud, whatever layer of that tiering is. It's actively told you, here's your problem, and off you go and fix it. But then the data, and essentially Orion and the solutions that we're talking about here are just massive data collectors. They're using many different protocols. They're storing that data in a database, which is then providing a web presentation layer. It's data mining to say, okay, this value exists in the database. So that's a trigger point for an alert. So from my point of view, as I said before, the more data that you're collecting in a controlled manner, and I emphasize controlled manner because without it, chaos ensues, then the more empowered you are to be able to respond, make decisions intelligently with regards to progression. Okay, so what I'm going to have a look at here is if you just want to publish that poll for me, just having a look, you see our monitoring tooling is not complete, is pretty much tied with our application and service state is, well, I can't see the whole of that word there. Look at that, that's huge. There we go. It's very complex. Yep, and that's very much what this webinar is about, that complexity of monitoring that infrastructure. Okay. So I am going to now go into the demonstration. So what we have here, and no, that's not a picture of me, I'm sure you'll be shocked to see. What we use here is we have a kind of internal demo platform we've built out. It's essentially an e-commerce website. So you can see here I've got my categories. I can do a search. I want to buy some shoes today, and this all allows me to kind of navigate. And so we're going to use this as a foundation. So the background behind this is that this is an IIS served web application. It runs on ASP.NET. It has a Microsoft SQL backend. And so from that point of view, we want to be able to monitor the different layers. It runs on a virtual server, off of storage, all these kind of things. So just in our little demo environment, there's a reasonable amount of complexity within this. So what we have built here is a summary page. So when we are working through this, we are identifying an individual application. In this case, an e-commerce website. But this could be your intranet, it's your ERP platform, it's your account solution, it's your communication platform. All of these deserve and need a dedicated dashboard. So under our environment here, you can see that we've got things for our wiki area, for Office 365, for our demo environments, our messaging platforms. So all of these kind of services, business delivery services, are modeled into our display here. And what I have within this GUI is data coming from a number of Orion modules. So just within this chart, now I'm going to start on this chart because this is an area I love. This was a feature that came along a few versions ago with regards PerfStack. And what I've done here is I've built a topology that has a number of KPI metrics. And so at any point I can look at this in detail. I can identify whether the spikes that I have on my slow web page performance, because this chart area here is about the individual steps in my web page journey analysis. Does that correlate to metrics that I'm seeing below? Well, you can see here that yes, there was a configuration change that took place at exactly the same time. So I'm going to want to go and have a look at that. Was that my root cause for causing my problems? Maybe a change was taken, and you can see very quickly maybe it was reset because we identified performance issues. This potentially is a kind of journey of analysis through the data. On the top left, you can see that I'm collecting data from AppOptics in this scenario. So this is telling me that I've got analysis on my response codes. Yeah. So blue is good. I'm seeing lots of 200s, but I'm also seeing some 400 errors and maybe 500 errors coming in here. Redirects are occurring. I've got my web performance monitor application. Yeah. So this module for Orion, and so for those that are not overly familiar with the Orion application, Orion is the big monitoring platform that SolarWinds have built over many, many years, and it is a modular design. So these individual menu structures that we have here, you can see are providing visibility of different tiers of different function. So to monitor the virtualization layer, SolarWinds provide a module to focus on that. They have one for storage. And so what we're going to do today is to kind of go through some of these key ones, demonstrate how important they are to gaining that insight into these tiered topologies. And so I'm going to start on this one here with regards to this web user experience monitor. So if I click on this top level link, so this is essentially our transaction. We have created a transaction that we are executing every 3 minutes that is performing this navigation through the web app. So you can see that I've got 10 steps, and all I have is a recording application. I go to my page, I interact with it, I perform in here a search. I'm looking at the results, I'm clicking on something, I'm adding something here to the shopping basket, you can see, and then at the bottom here I am going through a checkout process. So this is an experience journey that is representative of what my users are going to perform. I'm testing the functionality that I know. From this point of view, this search function may be a microservice. This checkout, again, is another microservice that's being consumed from multiple resources. Maybe this is a container. Maybe this is a separate virtual machine, or indeed coming from a SaaS provider. So being able to perform this top level function, for me, is one of the most important data monitorings that we are going to perform. This is the one that tells us, is the application working? And you can see at the top here, this has been kind of me over the last several hours and days just kind of preparing for this webinar, just creating a number of incidents. So we've got something to demonstrate today. So some of these are going to come from configuration changes. Some are going to be web page performance, database performance, virtualization issues.
I think I've heard you say before that configuration changes are normally one of the biggest causes of these sort of degradation issues?
Yeah, I think so. Certainly, when I look at surveys, and clearly surveys can be different in the way that questions are constructed, but it's a common known scenario in IT that configuration changes are the number one cause. Whether this is kind of fat fingering thing or not being tested or whatever it may be, yeah, change is the one that can cause the most number of problems.
I was going to ask this box on the right. It said, my understanding was we're talking about the topology of application, but that's saying the environment for Prosperon demo Orion server.
Yeah. Okay, so this box here is essentially showing my application topology. This is what we refer to as the mini app stack. Right. And what you can see here is that I've got this application. It's been a web app. Well, it's running through IIS. I said that at the beginning, and I said we've got a SQL backend. So this box is automatically put together. I haven't really had to do anything to build this up. So I've got this mapped all the way through to my storage layers. I can see that this is running off of this virtual sensor. We only have one, so it's not very exciting. But then I can see that actually this is running across 2 different hosts, and I've got issues with those hosts. I've got a yellow indicator. I've got servers that have got a problem. Right. So in this case, I've got my dev server. So this is my web application server, and then I should have my SQL server. There are issues there. So at this point, I could drill down and go and have a look. But this is giving me that insight into that topology of that application.
Okay.
Okay, so what we have here is the web journey. We can see the individual steps. We can see how things have changed over time. So I've got my baseline. Baselining is essential in your application. When you put monitoring in place and you say, okay, well, I don't want this web page to take more than 3 seconds. Well, if it's taking 4.5 seconds, on day one it's consistent, then either that threshold is wrong or immediately you've got an issue that you need to go and rectify. So this is a useful thing. We can potentially see trends from this. If I look at this over time, let's have a look. And I can see common trends that are occurring here. So if I hover over here, you can see that between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., I might want to drill into this, have a look at this in more detail. Okay, so it's actually 5 a.m. that this seems to occur. What's the reason for this? Well, I know in this case I have a backup running at that time. Well, that backup is quite invasive. Is there something that I can do to improve that and not have that impact on it?
So you can use this view to look back historically if there is something that's happened previously but isn't happening right now, for example.
It cannot be understated the importance of having historic data. If you have issues that are a common problem, you may be, every time this happens, somebody just goes on and firefights and does that first thing. Whereas if you see that it's a trend, then there's justification to go in and do more analysis. It's justification to say, look, we are being affected by this happening every time. In this case, in terms of this scenario that we've created deliberately with our backup process, It may be the fact that I'm going to go to my boss and say, I need the budget for a new backup solution because this one is causing these impacts.
Mm-hmm.
So there are so many questions that are surfaced from monitoring data, and then the answers that come from that, you have the base to make those decisions, say with intelligence and with evidence. Evidence is the one that gets you that budget. It's the one that confirms that this is something that needs something done to it. Okay, so what we have also here is a kind of web application screenshots. So all the way through this, I can see what are my users seeing. I'm capturing the results of those recorded automated journeys. And what we have down the bottom here, amongst other metrics with regards to load times, are when we have identified problems, what was the problem at the time? And I can see that in terms of HTML code. I can see that in terms of the screenshot. So in this case, it may be the fact that the link was missing. Yeah. So when we went to this page as part of our journey, the page didn't render fully, or something changed on the page, which meant that we could no longer navigate through and on. So this is all timestamped. You can see that this is something that was captured yesterday, something that was captured last week. So all of these kind of things are very much going to be able to bring your visibility through to what you should be concentrating, as I say, on in terms of that function. I'm just going to go into one of the known steps. So this is an individual page. Yeah, we can see in terms of the screenshot, if I open this up, this was what was captured. So clearly we did a search to go onto another page, but this page in itself took too much time to load. Okay, it's actually not doing so now, but you can again see that we have a trend of poor performance. We can see as we come down into the duration, again, we've got points in time where it has been running better, and then, okay, a change. Well, we'll go and correlate this in a moment to some other data sets. We could also run this from multiple locations. So for this, if this is a web application, I'd be inclined to kind of put an agent in the cloud or a remote site and see how this is consumed from an external location. But what we can see in the waterfall chart is the cause of our slowdown. So our legend here is telling us that we've got a kind of light blue. How long did the web server take to respond? Yeah, so the time that we saw the request come in to the time that the application then provided some data, okay, 163 milliseconds, really not very long. But nearly 2 seconds for an image that I can see is 1.1 meg in size, that seems a bit excessive. Is there some optimization that could be done here? Is it the way that the page has been constructed? Is the order? And indeed, I've got the link to these resources. So when I'm looking at this, I'm doing that analysis, and I can have a look and I can say, well, what was the CSS? What was the impactful element around this? So again, causal resolution can be identified. Okay, what I'm going to do here is just go back to my transaction, and I want to go and have a look at my web application. So here I'm going to go and have a look at my web server. As I say, this happens to be IIS, because clearly this as a functional service in this application tier is an essential ingredient. Lots of things are going to impact on this. Are the configuration settings correct? Have we got a load balancer in front of it? Okay, I'd be including my F5 load balancer or my AWS load balancer in all of the metrics. But what I've got here is that visibility where I can immediately identify that my IIS web server has got 3 websites configured on it. The default one has actually been unmanaged, it's been stopped, but we've got 2 in a running state. I've got my application pools. So we can go and have a look at these in more detail. Here we have data coming from the database. So we know in terms of the application architecture here that this web application is being serviced by a SQL database. Yeah? So when I ask for an image or the text for a product, or that a search is performed, actually the application code, the SP.NET application served by IIS is making database calls to allow that information to be presented as a dynamic function. And so therefore, database performance is, again, one of those critical ingredients. So now I can look at here the performance of my website as well as correlation to the performance of the database layer. And so here I've got the wait times for my queries that are being consumed for this application. And I can see that I've got some memory bottlenecks occurring. I can see there's some write logs, and maybe that's going to tell me that I've got some storage performance issues. We'll have a look at this in more detail in a moment, but again, just kind of reflecting the fact that I'm looking at the SAM application data here does not mean that I cannot provide information across the other modules that Orion has got populated.
So you mentioned the web server and the database server. Are these on the same server, or are these across different servers?
Nope, these are across different servers because, okay. Let's say in this example, I've got this IIS application is running off dev02, and I know that this SQL server is running off of SQL Server 04. So these are two different servers, but as I say, this is a very simplistic environment. If you probably saw from my slide in the PowerPoint, they could be dozens of servers. They could be dozens of containers that are ephemeral and going up and down on a microsecond basis. So this is a very simplistic topology compared to what is likely for customers here. Okay, so as I navigate down, you can see that the reason why my web application here is going as yellow is because I have an alert that my certificate's expired. So if I was to go to my web page, you can see actually, yes, I've got an insecure SSL because my certificate has expired. So my users that are going to that website are going to get that error response. They're going to actively have to say, I'm okay with going through this, and where everyone is trained, do not do that under any circumstances. So that is going to significantly affect my performance. We've obviously put this one in because certificates expiring is a common one that we put in place for customers. And then as we navigate down further, you can see that I've got my breakdown. Now, the interesting thing with this is things like this CPU memory consumption. This is broken down by a number of processes within IIS. This isn't the server. Yep, we can see the server performance elsewhere. We'll have a look at that in a moment. But here I've got the IIS function. I've got the really granular information about how this application level is working. I've got here my web page performance. This is my web application. So now I can see that I'm going to zoom in a bit because I can see that's actually quite small. So you can see here that I've got IIS metrics telling me which pages are running slowly that it is serving. Again, I've got visibility of certificate expiration. How is it configured? Yeah, so these are the bindings that are configured here. So it's not just about individual metrics, and you can see we're getting a lot of this, how many users are connected to this web application, but it's also about how things are configured. What data volume are things running from? Yep, is this correct? Is this from top tier storage versus something else? How is my disk I/O performing? So it's performance metrics, it's utilization metrics, it's consumption metrics. All of this is being captured so we can do our analysis. If I have done some stress testing as part of my development cycle and I know that this web application can serve around 1,000 concurrent users, above that figure we start seeing performance degradation, then I know to put active thresholds in place. So now I can then set my warning critical thresholds for this value, for example, and that would turn yellow and red when it exceeds that. And as I come back up the page here, you can see that what I'm now going to do is go across to the database layer in more detail. So I'm not having to kind of go back to the menu system in any of this. I'm navigating through the structure of the application. I'm seeing how it's architected visually, and I can navigate through those metrics. But this performance stack is giving me the steer where it has identified that there are problems. So I can concentrate on those areas to learn what's going on.
So as we're navigating into these different areas, are these navigating into different modules that we've spoken about earlier? Because I know there's some overlap where things like SAM, for example, will give you a small amount of visibility, and then something like DPA, for example, will give you more granularity when you drill down. So are we within one module here, or are we navigating between a number of different ones?
Yeah, good question. So if it hasn't been clear, apologies. So we started off in the web performance module. Yep, that's telling us how our web application is being served when we ask for pages as a browser user. Now we're looking at the SAM module, which is monitoring and capturing KPI data. In this case, I've looked at IIS. We are now seeing it on the database layer. And next, I'm going to show how the database performance is working. So from the database performance, you could say, well, am I not seeing that here? Well, you are, absolutely. As we go down, you can see that we are capturing metrics from individual databases. So if I just stage this one here, we can see it's red already. We're capturing error logs, so we're capturing log data. We're seeing what other servers are connected to this. So I can see immediately here that this SQL Server is actually being consumed by not just my server for this application, but also my wiki platform, my Active Directory server, processes. I mean, there's hundreds of metrics just in this screen alone for my database application performance. And so the distinction between what SAM does is very much around those KPIs, those metrics. How many users have I got connected? How many sessions per second are being generated? How many full scans? You'll see there are common metrics which are useful, so things like page splits, page life expectancy. Yep. This chart here, it should go up, it should plateau and drop down and keep doing that cycle. And it needs to go to certain levels. Well, we can, again, baseline that. But when we're looking at these database metrics, let's say the granularity that we have here of being able to see how it's configured. Yep. So now I know where my log files are, I know where my data files are, I know how the I/O is working. I can see here what users are making connections. So this user account, okay, well, why have I got high-level privilege access connected to this database, and it's been running for 21 hours as an active connection? That's a concern. Yep. Should that be happening from a security viewpoint? That's something that I would go off and investigate. We've got a red indicator here that we've got fragmentation. And obviously, in terms of our demo environment, we're doing some very nice clear highlighting for everyone. So we've got a table which has got some indexing problems. We know if we're going to then go off and do queries against that table in any way, it's likely to be running slower because of it. What we can also do here is then within the Orion interface is look at the database performance. And by performance, I'm referring to the query performance. Individual queries that are going through the database. Yep. So in this case, the web application on the IIS server is making these select and insert and update statements against the data tier. And so what we're doing with that is we are highlighting how those queries are performing. So what we'll do is go across to the DPA interface. Immediately you can see that we've got some advisories here. Yep, so there's one tuning advisory. Well, I know what that is. I could navigate to that immediately, but what I'm going to do is take you there on a slightly different path. So now I'm looking here at the same SQL Server as we've just looked at, but this one is not now focused towards those metrics, how many users we've got connected. It's performing visibility of query performance and which queries are experiencing the longest waits. Well, I've got a trend immediately presented here. Yep. On the 29th, 30th of May, that query immediately disappeared in terms of its performance issues. Now, I could go in and have a look at that in more detail, have an understanding about that was. Maybe I did that as part of that process. And here, actually, you can see that query performance is now significantly better. It's the same query. If you look at the SQL hash number, that unique GUID, now it's running this. My understanding, because obviously we did this, is that was a poorly configured query It was identified, it was tuned, and now we're having much better performance of that. So all of this is now being surfaced. You can see that I've got things like anomaly detection. I've got my trend of behavior. I've had an improvement in performance, and that's clearly visible here with that correlation of a query update. Our performance levels improved and then went down. And then around this time, we had some degradation. So a number of things are going to come through here, and this application is really, really good for bringing not just the fact that here's some information for you to determine yourself, but also the analysis of the performance of queries to tell you you've got problems. So here at the bottom, you can see that I've got a display that's telling me that we've got high utilization. It's got some tuning advice, and I can go off and I can have a look at this in more detail. Well, what I'm going to do here is use my example. So what we've done here is we've named this query. I know that by the analysis of this, that this query, so this actual statement that was executed against our database is doing is part of the application stack that's collecting data out of the database for my purchase orders. So I can name it, I can give it clarity. So now when I'm reviewing this, I understand what it's about. And here we have visibility of the query performance, the plans. We've also got indications that the database performance application has identified itself that there is improvements that it can be made. So let's go and have a look at the advisory. So I've not configured this. This has been learnt and determined by this application, by DPA. And what it's brought to the surface here is the fact that we have an inefficient SQL statement, or in this case, a structure. We have indexing issues. So what it's telling us is that the clustered index scan, of which I can click on it, I've got all of the background that tells me about that information. And so it's recommending that some indexing can be performed. And we've got a link to tell us, actually, this is the indexing that we could configure. Because it knows the structure, it's looked at the schema, it's looked at the query, and it's brought this to the surface. We can have a look at the plan, the actual execution plan. So anybody that's on the session today, there's a DBA, you're used to seeing this kind of information, and you can see here, in terms of the step process, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, that it spent most of the time, we've got this cost value, doing an index scan. So we've got evidence, we've got guidance to go off and make improvements to the application. And that's very much around what this application is here for. Whether we are looking at the performance, whether we're seeing how many times it's being executed, what the weights occurring here, whether there's any deadlocks and blocks occurred that are going to affect our overall web application consumption of the database layer. Okay, so I'm just going to go back here, and you can see as we look through this data. So I just wanted to stage, actually it's done now. So what we can see here is that this data is injected into the Orion GUI itself. So I don't need to go off to this separate application. I can look at it and I can do that analysis here. I can see that this query is the slow performing, I've got access to the overall data, and then immediately I've got the link to go and open that application. So SolarWinds are trying to bring this complexity into, and I hate to say this, overly used expression of single pane of glass, but that is very much what Orion is about, is bringing all of this data into this single web application display. Okay, now I'm going to just go across to my summary page again. I'm just having a look and see if there's any questions, but we'll hold those at the end. I'm conscious of time, so I shall go through this quite quickly. But if you do have questions,
please. We do have some good questions already, but yeah, if anyone's got any more, please feel free to add them.
Fantastic. So we saw on our summary page that we are seeing the information across different modules. Web Performance Monitor, app optics, database. We've created a map display so we can see the topology of this application and how they are all performing. I can have a look at the virtualization layer. I'm using the log analyzer module for Orion to bring all of my IIS logs in here. So maybe I wanted to do a search here for a keyword of error and identify whether there's anything that's going to come from here. And you can see immediately that I've got errors being recorded by my web application, and it's in the basket area, the most critical area of the website, obviously. I've got my advisories from DPA, and up here I've got my configuration changes. So for this application, I can see that I've got configuration changes taking place on my application. I've got them on my server where new drivers have been updated and installed. I've got IIS. So what I'm actually going to do is go and show the bigger summary page for SCM here, for the server configuration manager. So you can see all of the different things that I've got coming through. You can see actually there's been changes on SQL Server that have taken place. So what I want to do here is identify. I can see that I've got some baseline mismatches. Yep. So in this example, on my application server, it's telling me that there are 3 mismatches against what I have defined as the baseline. Yep. If changes are made against that, then it's going to immediately surface. And I've created an alert definition on that as well. So let's go and have a look at these ones in more detail. So here we can see exactly what change took place. So in this case, I'm monitoring a config file, a text file that's a XML that is going to provide the definition, whether it's YAML, XML, it doesn't matter. We are monitoring that. And what we've got here, okay, nothing major, but what we can see here is that the email for notifications has changed from webmaster to hostmaster. Well, maybe that was a valid, genuine definition. In this example, if I go into the node itself, you can see that we've got things like the IIS configuration has changed. So from this point of view, I know that a new website was put in. We saw that in the list, in the fact that somebody's now doing a video streaming app from that server. Well, I don't want that running on there. That's going to be too demanding in terms of performance. It's somebody's put it on the wrong machine. Okay, so hopefully in terms of the demonstration, we've literally just, because of the time, we could try to keep these to an hour, and you can see that we're slightly overrunning on that time. There is so much more that can be achieved. We focused on WPM, on SAM, on the configuration changes, on the database performance. I could have shown you the virtualization. I could have shown you storage. I could have shown you how the app optics application will do code level monitoring. There's, let's say, a lot of functionality and different tiering that's necessary really to get that full insight. Okay, Scott, do you want to throw out some questions that you found?
Yes, yeah, we've got some really good questions, so I'll chuck some at you, put you on the spot.
Go on.
So we've got a question here. We have an array of servers on site. Is the application monitor purely for web-based applications, or can we also monitor servers hosting other apps?
Okay, so the principle here is the web performance monitor is there to monitor web applications. So as long as we're talking about web applications in that question, then as long as you have the ability to connect to your web app, so it may be in the cloud, it may be local. Orion has the ability to have remote players, of what they are called. They are essentially agents that you can distribute that will perform the web page checks from that defined location. So let's say in our example, we just had it running from the Orion server, but typically I encourage customers to say, okay, put it at the reflective point in the environment that users are. So it may be the fact that at our remote office, we've got a machine that's there, we'll put a player on it, and we will generate that test from that location as well. So I can validate that users going through the network topology are hitting that resource. So it's really just about the connectivity capability to that web app. If you're talking about non-web applications, then there are other methods of us performing what we refer to as user experience monitoring, or real user monitoring, i.e. RUM. And so it may be something, whoever asked that question, that maybe we can kind of have an offline conversation to confirm what that is.
Absolutely, yeah. We've got a couple more. So whilst we've got some time, we'll make use of it. We've got a question. What can you see about voice latency, jitter, etc.? So can you see voice or video issues and impacts of traffic prioritization?
Yeah, so there's a couple of techniques that we would use here. So I'm not sure actually what the state of this demo environment is. But what we got here, no, we haven't got anything on this lab. So there are a number of techniques. Essentially, when we're talking about voice and video delivery, we're talking about the protocols that are providing that. And so what you've got with things like the Netpath is the ability to identify, well, how are they being consumed? So in our example here, maybe this is the video path. Yeah, we've got a remote site that goes to headquarters. They have lots of video streaming or voice telephony. Maybe I'm going to put something in place that's going to allow me to see the path that takes across my network. So this Netpath feature of Orion allows us to kind of identify that and see, well, okay, this is the journey that's been taking place between this site and this site where the video conferencing works. What I was going to show you in terms of this voice and network quality module for Orion is that it is very much focused towards voice performance. So it's doing latency checks, it's performing synthetic transactions to validate how RTC communication is going to be working. So absolutely, we can do a lot in terms of performance monitoring of video conferencing and voice systems.
So we've got a quite interesting question around budgeting for storage, and then we've got a few questions that are focused around cloud providers. So I'll give you the budget one first. It may be one that we have to take offline and get back to the person who's asked the question. So I'll try and group the cloud ones together for you. So the budget one, first of all, how do you budget for a storage required per device service so that you can appropriately manage the systems going forward? As this level of storage means lots of logs to search, correlate, and store.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to answer this hopefully in an appropriate way. If it's not, I apologize. And again, I suggest that we could take this offline. But when we're talking about storage consumption, typically we are talking about virtual machines. We're talking about how those resources are provisioned. So we've got, and I'm using the online demo here just to be clear, we've got the virtualization monitoring here. And you can see that I've got a number of different viewpoints into virtualization. I've got recommendations. I'll have a look at that in a moment. I've got capacity planning, and I've got storage. Now, these are just out of the box. We will typically tune these for a customer. And what we can see here is understanding about, well, dare I say it, when I ask for a server, I'm going to ask for good quality. I'm going to ask for another couple of CPUs, another 8 gig of RAM, and I want a little bit more storage because I want to make sure my application runs really nicely. Is that what it needs? Maybe, maybe not. So this is very much about that kind of right sizing. It's identifying, well, where is it being consumed? How is it being consumed? How is it performing? So from a storage consumption point of view, whether it's the data store, whether it's the volumes that are being served, whether it's the performance of those, whether I've got tiered capabilities of maybe SAS, SATA, and then SSDs, and all these kind of different layers, perhaps. So I want to be able to analyze where I've got my issues. So on this data store, I'm running out of space. I've got latency occurring. On the VMs, how are they being consumed? Well, on this capacity planning, I can go in and I can have a look and I can see where is it being used. I can do the analysis to identify, well, what happens if I need to add more? How much life have I got? I.e., have I got a forecast where if I was to add another 6 terabytes of storage to a certain vCenter, is that going to be sufficient for the next 6 months? So it has that capability of performing that function. It also has a number of options in here, and I appreciate I'm running through this very quickly because I'm conscious of time, where the virtualization manager application is telling us, and let me find the storage one here. I've got orphan VMDKs, so that's reclaimable space. I've got virtual machines which haven't been used for a while. I've got snapshot consumption. I've got in here the fact that maybe from a storage point of view, that I can reclaim and I can bring down this 80 gigabyte drive to maybe 40 gig, because that's all that's being consumed and has been for 6 months.
Okay.
So I hope I answered the question.
Well, I haven't. We are out of time now officially. I haven't seen any attendees leave just yet, so we do have a number of questions around cloud. Do you think we can quickly sort of sneak something in around that?
I'm happy to continue, and as you say, if people drop off, then we'll take the strong hint.
I'll try and group them so we can sort of cover them off, but they're slightly different areas. So one is around can the monitoring be changed if a company's migrating from physical servers, 500 servers, virtual machines, I assume, to web-based servers. Another is around how it integrates with Azure-based server clusters containing web apps. And the third one is around how it manages across multiple cloud providers. So it may not be able to handle all three at once, but just thought you could chuck something in there.
Right, okay, so I'll answer the first one. It doesn't essentially matter whether it's a virtual machine, it's a container, it's a physical machine, it's a virtual machine in the cloud, it's on-prem. We have in the platform protocols available that allow us to go and collect that data. So one of the things that you will see in the data that we have in Orion is that when we're looking at a device, it will tell us that this is a virtual machine. It will tell us it's running in the cloud. It will tell us it's a physical machine, because that's pertinent information. But you will see that pretty much most of the metrics, 90% of the metrics, are common. It doesn't matter if CPU is running off a virtual machine or a physical box, it's still being consumed. Correlating that to the virtual host, correlating that to the to the cloud infrastructure, absolutely. So this is where the different technologies will just present slightly different metrics, perhaps, and the presentation of data is important so we can understand that it's a virtual machine running in the cloud. Okay, so now I need to be conscious of costs and the fact that if I'm not right-sizing this environment, I've got money flowing down the drain, essentially, because it's got compute resource it's not ever consuming. Remind me on the second one. I'm looking through the list.
I'm trying to remember which order I read them out to you in now. Probably would have been good if I'd given you one at a time. So I think the first one was the one that you've answered. And then it was
Azure-based clusters. Yep, I can see that at the top. Yep. So Orion has native integration to cloud. So when we are looking at, so I need to go over here. We haven't got our integration in our place at the moment. So when we're looking at adding Azure, AWS, we are literally just providing an API key. And if we apply our API key, all of the data that you see on the screen and the various bits over here on the side in terms of VPN, VPC, such like, all of this will inherently come down immediately. It will then automatically associate my application monitoring. So if I've associated a SharePoint SAM template to a server running in the cloud, that's automatically going to appear on this list. And again, the data metrics that are then presented allow you to identify and understand that this is a machine running in the cloud. Therefore, there's a different viewpoint on this compared to if this is running locally. So absolutely, cloud-based, on-prem, very easy for us to put that in place and support that infrastructure. Huge number of customers are running as hybrid models, as cloud only, as on-prem only, and so we need to be able to support all of those.
Okay, perfect. I think you've sort of touched on the third one as well there. So I think we're out of time now, really. There are a couple of follow-up questions that we have had asking about.
There's just one that I saw there. So one of the questions from Stuart was, where can we find manuals and further videos on this? So one of the first places you want to be going to is our blog. So we spend a lot of time putting information together, whether it's textual blogs, whether it's video blogs. So our YouTube channel, as was indicated before, or indeed our blogs. So we have a large number of things on here. And what we try and do is give practical guidance. if you want to achieve something, then this is some guidance on how to deal with it. Again, on our YouTube, we've got the videos, and as you said at the beginning, Scott, Thwack is a fantastic resource. Me and my team contribute a lot to it, and also obviously the SolarWinds website itself has various materials, but we obviously as a partner and relationship builder for our customers, we are here to provide knowledge and guidance directly as well.
I was just going to say, apart from the ones that we're able to answer today, we'll follow up with any that we haven't found the time to respond to. So I can see there are some that have followed up on some answers that we've given, some that have asked where they can find more information with that, not just online, but with regards to someone to talk to. So we'll make sure we follow up on the questions that we haven't been able to answer today. But otherwise, for all of you that are still with us, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you found it informative. If there is a question that you didn't find the time to ask today and that you think of, now that you'd like to ask, we'd like to ask sort of down the line, you can find us on the contact details on our website. Obviously, if you have an account manager, if you already know us, or we've got live chat there as well. So plenty of avenues to do so, and we'll do our best to make sure we answer. But thank you very much all for joining us. Hope you found it useful, and we'll hopefully see you at our next one.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for staying as well.
Thank you.
Bye now.